Hi, this is Case Files, the Ageless Singer. It's a new story. Her penetrating blue eyes burned his soul as she stared at him from the stage. Her red lips were inches from the microphone. Her mouth slowly opened, and over the speakers, an alluring voice fell onto his ears as she sang, "You are the one I want, the one I need to entertain me." The record she accompanied crackled softly, and the slow tempo unfolded into mournful, held-out horns, swelling from note to note, alongside a lightly shuffled ride and snare. Her seductive voice filled out the room, and there he sat, entranced. The man's scotch, now watered down, was sweating. The cool precipitation ran down his fingers, reminding him that the drink was still there. He downed it and stared as she waltzed back and forth, her fingers elongated as if they were reaching out for him. The lights dimmed, and a singular spotlight lit up the microphone. She appeared in the light and finished her sweet calling over soft horns from the record. All that you are, souls in hand, youthful taste, reborn again. Soft applause came from the few patrons as the man's eyes followed her to the bar. A tight-fitted red dress accentuated her curves. He took a quick breath in and made his way to her. "That drink is on me, Harrison," the man said. He pulled the 20 out of his wallet. She looked at him. Her blue eyes met with his. The man's heart raced, and no words came out as he froze in place. "Thank you," she said. "I've never seen you here before. It's always the same people, day in and day out. You are a breath of fresh air." She proceeded to light a cigarette. Her black lipstick stained the filter, and she blew the smoke out of her nose. Her drink arrived, and she tipped it towards the man. "What's your name?" she asked. "Thomas. Thomas Ambrose," he said. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Ambrose." "Harrison," she said. "Get Mr. Ambrose the Singer's Delight." "Right away, Miss Draco," said Harrison. Harrison pulled out his shaker and a rocks glass. He filled the glass and shaker with ice and proceeded to muddle blackberries. He then added rum, gin, and absinthe. He shook it vigorously. The ice clanked inside the shaker. He popped the glass off the shaker and covered the opening with the strainer, and emptied the shaker into the glass. For one final touch, he added a sugar cube and lit it on fire. The glass now sits in front of Thomas. "Stein Yemas," she said with a perfect Greek accent, and she downed her drink. Thomas raised his glass towards her and blew out the small flame, then downed his drink. The spirit entered his bloodstream. A euphoric feeling overcame him. The colors in the room became vivid, and everything became a blur, except for her. Her form stood out amongst a haggard bar. She pulled out a small mirror from between her breasts. She held the mirror to her face, touching up her eyebrows, then her lips. Her blue eyes looked up at Thomas and met with his once again. A hypnotic sense fell upon him. Nothing could make him turn his eyes away. "Are you a married man, Mr. Ambrose?" she said in an interesting tone. "No, Miss Dracos, I have no one in my life, only me." He said this truthfully and pathetically. This was a fact he never liked to share with anyone. It had been years since he felt the touch of a woman. "A man like you should never be alone." "Harrison," she said, "can you get Mr. Ambrose another drink, and I'll take another one of these?" "Right away, Miss Dracos." Harrison scurried around the bar making their drinks, while Miss Dracos and Mr. Ambrose talked and laughed. Harrison continued to serve them their drinks throughout the night. 2 drinks turned into 4, and 4 into 8. "Mr. Ambrose, it has been a pleasure talking to you. I know that it is late, but would you like to come up to my apartment? It is just above this place." Thomas didn't know what to say. He was flabbergasted. With how long it had been since he felt a woman's touch, you'd think he would jump at the chance, especially with how beautiful she was. But he was reserved, and his shyness overcame him. "Miss Dracos, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure," he said in an unsure voice. "Mr. Ambrose, I don't just take any man back to my apartment. I have not been with a man in years. The longing I am feeling, and the loneliness that has been on my mind and in my heart has been too much. You have been a breath of fresh air in my stale life. Please, Mr. Ambrose, you won't regret it." Thomas began to turn red, and a wry smile appeared on his face. He nodded his head and said, "Miss Dracos, it would be my pleasure to join you. Mr. Ambrose, the pleasure is all mine." They said their goodbyes to Harrison and headed to the back of the small club. They arrived at a narrow staircase and climbed up them. Miss Dracos spoke of being a little girl and growing up in Greece by the ocean. When they arrived at the top floor, there was a door to the right. It was ruby red, and markings adorned the frame. "Right in here, Mr. Ambrose," she said as she opened the door, an outstretched arm directing him the way inside. The room was surprisingly big. Small antiques decorated a table to the right, and to the left, a small bar with a few select spirits. The walls were covered with paintings from numerous renowned artists, and in front of him was a red couch. There was no television, only a record player in front of the couch. "Mr. Ambrose, have a seat." She led him to the couch. Its velvet touch sent his hairs on end. Thomas sat quietly, far less chatty than he was at the bar. His nerves were getting the better of him. "Would you care for another drink, Mr. Ambrose?" He nodded his head and rubbed his hands nervously together. She made them fresh drinks. Bourbon on the rocks. She walked the drinks over and sat down next to him. They drank their drinks, and she talked more about her past life in Greece. "Would you like a private song, Mr. Ambrose?" Without even waiting for an answer, she got up and put a record on. The small speakers distorted from the high volume, and she began to sing the same song from earlier. "You are the one I want, the one I need to entertain me." Her voice resonated in his ears. The words worked together. The words worked their way into his brain, and a fog began to take him over. "All that you are, souls in hand, youthful taste, reborn again." She began to prowl her way to him, holding out the note in perfect pitch. He could not move. His eyes glazed over. He was under her spell, and there was nothing he could do about it. She touched his chest, and her hands made their way to his face. He trembled at her touch and grabbed her hips. She kissed his lips and pulled him in, and whispered the words again from the song into his ears. "All that you are, souls in hand, youthful taste, reborn again." The fog cleared from his mind, and she became crystal clear. Her beautiful appearance dropped, and it showed her for what she was. Her skin was no longer porcelain white. Now it was tinted green and viscous. Her gentle hands were now rough, and her nails appeared as claws, sharp and deadly. Her mouth was now filled with sharp teeth, and a pernicious look came across her once godly face. Terror overcame him, and a muted scream failed to escape his throat. She screeched loudly and bit into his neck. His eyes widened, and he tried to make any kind of noise to call for help. No help would come from him, though. With every gasp of air, his blood gurgled out of his mouth, foaming and thick. His drained body collapsed at her feet, and she was now anew, a fresh soul to feed her and keep her alive. Harrison would help her get rid of the body of Mr. Ambrose. He was her slave in this life and death. His body was found by the dumpster of a small restaurant. Detective Swain had no answers. Only more questions. Mr. Ambrose was drained of its vital fluids. His skin was darker and brittle. Detective Swain took out his notepad and added it to his case files. So, yeah, that's a new story. Hope you like it.